Hypixel has hundreds of different game modes, but what if I told you that some of them don't even exist? Now, this might confuse you a little, and you may think that I'm just talking about deleted game modes, but it's so much more than that. From unreleased game modes to games that have been hidden from the public, and even whole game lobbies which you can't even access anymore. In today's video, we'll be going through all the craziest instances of Hypixel's hidden game modes and the deep iceberg that follows, starting with the surface level. Now that we've gotten ourselves started with the surface level by introducing the iceberg, let's talk about the technical removals of Hypixel games. Or, in other words, Hypixel games that may have been removed, but still exist on the server in some way or another. The best example of this phenomena comes down to the seasonal arcade games. You see, the seasonal arcade games on Hypixel are games that are only added with the seasonal exclusive events of Easter, summer, Halloween, and holiday or Christmas seasonal events on Hypixel, meaning they're only around at those specific times of year whilst those events are around. This means that when these games aren't around, they're removed from the server to the point where not even their leaderboards are available until the game comes back around, which makes the game essentially removed from the server. The same concept can be applied to seasonal lobby games, which are just games added to the Hypixel lobbies for specific events such as pumpkin smashing on the Halloween event, which of course comes back every year for every new Halloween event. Another type of technical removal we can talk about though is the removal of a few Skywars modes, starting with the lab modes. If you don't know, lab modes in Skywars are essentially what Dreams modes are in Bed Wars, the original game but with a twist. For example, with Lucky Blocks, which is the only real remaining lab mode in Skywars that you can play unless you've got the MVP++ rank and have a private party where you can run private games of various other lab modes. Besides the private game lab modes, Hypixel also used to have other different lab modes such as the Floor is Lava and Blizzard among others, which don't work anymore and not even their play commands work anymore, but there are two other Skywars modes which do have working play commands even if they were deleted from the server. Mega Doubles and Ranked Skywars were two of the older Skywars modes that were removed throughout the years, and whilst if you have any of the basic Hypixel ranks and try running their play commands, it will lead to nothing. But if you try with MVP++, it will say that it requires a private party to play the game. If you try running a game of Mega Doubles or Ranked with MVP++, even with a private party, it simply won't work. And I got my friend Rice who has YouTube Rank to try it out, but still no luck. And to be honest, I don't even think a staff member could run a game of Ranked Skywars or Mega Doubles. My working theory is that their play commands exist but aren't connected to any servers, making it so you can't play them. And wrapping up these technical removals of games from the server, we can move to the next entry on the iceberg and one of the most notorious Hypixel lobbies on the server, the prototype lobby, also known as the PTL. The PTL is not home to any certain games all the time because the prototype lobby is described by Hypixel as a dedicated space on the server where you can help us test fun and new mini games and features. The main premise is to get the community involved to give more feedback on these new games, whilst the Hypixel admins have more time to work on other games and updates instead. This has led to many games coming out of the prototype lobby such as Bed Wars, Duels, Skyblock, Murder Mystery, Hide and Seek, Zombies, Capture the Wool, The Bridge, The Pit, Wool Wars, and Pixel Party. But also many other Hypixel games that we'll get into a bit later, but before we do, we need to first learn how the prototype lobby works. Some prototype games might have leaderboards and others might not, but there's one thing that is always certain with prototype games, with that being that your stats in prototype lobby games are hidden from the public, so they can't actively be tracked by anyone except Hypixel unless if they add leaderboards, which adds to limited stats tracking. And because of this, when a game makes it out of the prototype lobby, there's a chance that your stats on that game may be wiped when it releases, such as when Bed Wars and Wool Wars got out of the lobby, but there's also a chance that your stats may be kept, like with Pixel Party and The Pit, where players kept their stats from the prototype lobby. Keep this in mind because when games come out of the prototype lobby, you'll have the ability to share stats in them, but if they don't, you don't really have that ability, which leads to a few things to note. The first thing being that stats in the prototype lobby may be tampered with or reset at any time, making prototype games essentially shadow games that, if removed, they become untraceable on Hypixel besides the old posts and media made by the community and admins alike. Now that we have that out of the way, let's head deeper to the tip of the iceberg where we have 6 different deleted prototype games to talk about, starting with Survival Dash. Survival Dash is on the older side of the prototype games, being essentially one of the first games in the prototype lobby, being added over over 6 years ago with the prototype lobby in 2017, where the game remained before being removed. Survival Dash was, in simple terms, a quote-unquote mega game, which in Hypixel terms is a bigger version of an already existing Hypixel game, but with its own twists, and as the name suggests, a lot more players and a way bigger map. If the name didn't give it away already, Survival Dash was inspired by survival games and was a loot and run style game just like normal survival games was, but with the addition of a dash ability where if you right-clicked with your weapon, you would dash forward to add for more movement, especially when the map is so big. One of the bigger and more OG Hypixel YouTubers, Refraction, made a video on Survival Dash and described it as
one huge 72-player version of the survival games,
but where
the gear is a bit more crazy,
referring to how much more overpowered Survival Dash was compared to normal survival games, where in Survival Dash you spawn with a full set of iron armor and a stone sword, which you can quickly upgrade to full protection and sharpness diamond gear throughout the game. And in survival games, you spawn with, well, nothing. And crafting even a singular diamond armor piece like diamond boots is considered one of the hardest things to pull off in a game of survival games. Because of these many reasons, Survival Dash was never really seen as Survival Dash, but more as just another mega game like a sort of Mega Blitz, as even the title of the aforementioned Refraction video was exactly that, Mega Blitz. Soon after its release to the prototype lobby, Survival Dash was removed, where it was then replaced with Murder Mystery, a game which turned out to be infinitely more successful than Survival Dash ever would have been. Another game that was removed from the prototype lobby was UHC Deathmatch, a game which is on the server today, but was originally replaced by zombies after serving a short time in the prototype lobby alongside Survival Dash. If you don't know, UHC Deathmatch is essentially the last endgame stage of another one of Hypixel games, UHC Champions, where if a winner hadn't been declared after enough time passes, all players would get teleported to an arena where they would have to fight to the death. The original version of UHC Deathmatch had no real home and was, just as the name suggested, a UHC Deathmatch. On its own, the game didn't serve a lot of purpose, but with the addition of duels to the prototype lobby, UHC Deathmatch became part of it and an eventual part of the duels lobby and a part of an NPC in the UHC lobby today. And whilst UHC Deathmatch had some backlash on its initial removal, it had nowhere near the amount of backlash as when Hypixel removed Battle Royale. Battle Royale was one of the most popular games in the Hypixel community, and its removal from the prototype lobby was one of the most controversial decisions Hypixel has ever made, receiving immense backlash over the years after its removal. Whilst in the prototype lobby, the game consisted of a solo, doubles, and 4 teams mode, and was removed because Hypixel said they couldn't find a great and fun core game for Battle Royale within Minecraft, saying that the limits of the game prevented them from making Battle Royale what they truly wanted to achieve. Essentially, what happened was Battle Royale was removed to be improved, and in a very hidden secret subforum, a former Hypixel admin made this post not to promote its cancellation even after a promised revamp to the game, leaving the community in dust. The removal of Battle Royale was not only due to Hypixel's lack of consistency in their promises, but favored for other updates such as a Warlords and Classic Games update, 2 game lobbies which clearly need these updates more anyway. And now, with Battle Royale aside, it's time to move on to our next deleted game. King of the Hill, also known as KOTH, was a prototype lobby game which was around for over half a year in 2019, receiving little to no updates throughout the 6 months, and due to this, it was removed on November 19th of the same year due to lacking the attention needed to continue development. KOTH was a 12-player game where 2 teams of 6 players would fight to capture the points of 2 different altars to get more points over time. The first team to 999 points would win. A 3v3v3v3 mode was eventually added in the future, being the same concept but with more teams and altars, and whilst the game itself seems simple enough, it had a lot of other complicated things such as perks, upgrades, and potion effects on the different altars, which made the game way more complicated. Whilst it was sad to see it go, most people didn't even know KOTH existed, and there wasn't as much negative feedback on its removal compared to games such as Battle Royale. And our next game, Tower Wars. Tower Wars used to be Hypixel's own take on the tower defense genre. Yes, like balloons and that stuff. But the reality is that Tower Wars had its flaws and was a very hard game to get into. But besides that, it was one of the most unique games Hypixel had seen in years, and it was added to the prototype lobby on January of 2019, and exactly 3 years after being added to the prototype lobby, after years of no updates, Hypixel finally posted something regarding the game, and it was not what anyone wanted to hear. Hypixel had announced the removal of Tower Wars in just a few weeks after that post. Right on the day of the 3-year anniversary of the release of the game would be removed. A very interesting birthday present from Hypixel, but Tower Wars' removal was very heavily disliked by the Hypixel community, and even with one of my most popular videos being made on the topic. After Tower Wars, there was one more game to be removed from the prototype lobby, Invaders. Invaders is a 16-player game with 4 teams of 4 who have their own separate base, and the game is set in space with the ultimate goal of your team collecting resources and, instead of eliminating the other teams, repairing your base, or in this case spaceship, to win the game. That's the simple way of explaining it anyway. The thing is, Invaders was a really complicated game, and it did not help that various different Hypixel admins were quitting at the time, especially with some of them having been key developers on the game or important to help with managing bugs on the server. Truth be told, Invaders was not only very complicated, but it was also very buggy at the same time, where some bugs would make the game unplayable. Because of all of this, Invaders was removed from the server shortly after its release in late 2021, and was removed in March of 2022 in favor of World Wars, a game which has its own problems I'm sure we can tackle in a whole other video, or a bunch that I've already made.